Hello and welcome to number 18 in the Child Studies series on Chinese Australian history. And today we're talking about women, women in very general terms rather than individuals. And that's because not a lot of research has been done about women of the Chinese diaspora. And I wrote a particular article about that entitled Holding Up Half the Family. I myself have interviewed women in the villages, but it's women in the villages that are particularly missing from the history. A lot of people in places like Australia and in the United States have tried to look at women in the diaspora, and what they've done is look for individual women that they've found a bit of information about, they've left something behind, or they've become a bit more prominent because they've become businesswomen or whatever. But of course, typically these are historians looking at the sources they have rather than looking at the general picture and seeing what's missing. And what's missing is, of course, as you'll see from how A.I. Watts has discussed this topic, is the thousands of women who stayed behind. Now, an exception to this research is a wonderful research by Shen Hui Fen, who wrote her thesis and then a book called China's Left Behind Wives, Families of Migrants from Fujian to Southeast Asia of the 1930s to 1950s. Now, of course, she's done that about women in Fujian. Mostly, of course, here in Australia, we're talking about people from Guangdong. Very little research about that. An exception is Sandy Robb's thesis called North Queensland's Chinese Family Landscape. Now, again, she's mostly focusing on women in Australia rather than in the villages, but she does it in a way, Sandy does it in a way in where you look at what difference women made, the appearance of women, the existence of women, how they shaped the history, rather than just picking at individuals that may or may not make for an interesting story, or so you can say, oh, well, we're looking at women as well. As I say, I think historians need to do a lot more. I only interviewed a few women in the villages many years ago, and unfortunately they were, of course, all elderly. They were the daughters mainly of or wives of men, and they were able to give me some information going back to the 1920s and 30s. But we probably missed the opportunity to do a lot more at this stage. So nevertheless, I think it's very important that they are highlighted, and that's what we're doing in this particular topic today. I hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into, well, a bit of a historical blind spot. We're challenging how we typically picture one of the largest migrations in history.
That's right, the Chinese diaspora before the mid-20th century.
Exactly. And when you think of, Chinese men venturing overseas for fortune, maybe to the gold fields in America or Australia, it's easy to assume they were the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
But what if I told you there was an equally large, maybe even larger group whose experiences have been largely overlooked?
The women who stayed behind, the ones who remained in their South China villages.
Precisely.
And our source material for this deep dive, it really pushes back against those traditional interpretations. It sheds light on the profound, yet, as you said, under-researched lives of these women.
Mm-hmm.
They were absolutely central to this global movement, even if they never actually left home.
So our mission today is pretty clear. We're going to try and uncover why their stories have been neglected for so long, what their lives really involved.
And how bringing their perspectives forward can fundamentally reshape our entire understanding of this huge historical event.
It really can. Get ready to maybe rethink some core assumptions about migration, family, and, well, what success even means in this context. Okay, let's start with just the sheer scale of this oversight. Historically, when we talk about the Chinese diaspora, especially, say, to places like Australia and the United States, it's almost always framed as a movement of men.
That's the standard narrative.
But the research we're digging into argues that the role of the women who stayed back in their South China villages has been vastly under-researched.
Hugely.
And this has led to a picture that's, well, too focused on leaving and settlement.
Right, the going out part.
Rather than remaining and returning, which is just as important, it seems.
Absolutely. And the numbers alone are quite striking. These women, mothers, sisters, wives, daughters, they form the largest group of women connected to this whole diaspora.
Right.
Think about the U.S. in 1900. You got nearly 32,000 Chinese men reported as married.
Okay.
But only about 2,100 Chinese women were actually present in the country.
Wow. So simple math tells you.
Thousands of wives remained in China.
That really does put the scale in perspective. Was this Was this pattern mainly a U.S. thing, or do we see similar kinds of gendered migration elsewhere? What does that tell us?
That's a great question. And no, it wasn't just the U.S. We see a very similar pattern in Australia.
Okay.
In 1911, the census there recorded over 6,700 Chinese men who had wives back in China,
Compared to?
compared to only 801 living with wives in Australia.
Goodness, the gap is enormous.
It's huge. The sheer magnitude of women who stayed behind is just undeniable. And what this tells us, fundamentally, is that the Chinese diaspora isn't just a story of men moving.
Right.
It's a story of interconnected families, where the non-movement of women is actually just as critical to interpret as the men's journeys. Their existence, their roles, the decisions they made back in the villages, all of that directly shaped the experience of the men overseas and the very nature of the diaspora itself.
So it's not just about who is where. It's about the reality of their daily lives. And the sources suggest these lives were, well, a complex tapestry of contradictions.
Very much so.
You have relative wealth, apparently, but also poverty, independence, sort of, but also profound dependence, authority mixed with anxiety, loneliness, and freedom.
It's that mix.
Yeah.
Marrying a Gold Mountain fellow, that was the term for men going overseas for fortune.
Right, the gold rush dream.
Exactly.
Oh.
It was often seen as desirable, even if it meant the husband was gone for years, decades sometimes.
Uh-huh.
Local magazines from the time, these Kweokan, they even described the lucky wife of a Gold Mountain guest. Making special offerings, having family feasts when a gold letter, a remittance arrived.
Ah, the money from overseas.
Yes. But that lucky image, well, it was often far from the truth.
How so?
Pinky King's account, for instance, paints a much harsher picture. It talks about the intense toil of women whose remittances were low or maybe didn't come regularly.
So they couldn't rely on it.
Not always. They were forced to collect wood in the mountains, to sell, work constantly in the fields at home.
Yeah.
It really shifts that idealized image to one of just relentless labor for many.
And with the men gone, these wives and mothers, they effectively stepped into really significant roles, didn't they?
Absolutely. They became the de facto heads of their families.
Managing everything.
Pretty much. Households, caring for elderly relatives, the children, handling all the spending, collecting rents, even buying and selling land in some cases.
Wow, that seems like a radical shift, especially in a culture that traditionally limited women's roles, right?
It was a huge shift, and it raises this important question. How did this economic leverage, this power they got from remittances, how did that intersect with the existing patriarchal structures?
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Because we clearly see women exercising significant de facto authority, real power in practice,
What?
but often at a profound personal cost. This financial dependency, for example, it brought immense pressure.
I can imagine.
Law Shilo recounted her sister-in-law actually going crazy when her husband failed to send money. Arthur Chang remembered the fear his family felt during those remittance gaps.
So the authority was precarious.
Exactly. It highlights the precariousness behind their newfound authority. It was often born out of necessity, not really choice.
And that emotional toll of separation, there's this incredibly vivid account from Lee Zier, wasn't there? A remittance courier in the 1920s.
Yes, that story is powerful.
He described delivering money to a Mrs. Guo. Her husband had left just months after their marriage, promising to return soon.
And initially, Lee Zier said he felt like the god of wealth bringing this money.
Right. But then...
But after years passed with the husband still not back, Mrs. Guo's reaction completely changed. She met Lee Zier with tears, refused to even sign the receipt for the money.
What did she say?
She lamented that her heartless man didn't keep his promise. And then she said, seeing money arrive here is like cutting my heart with a knife. It is selling my man for money I'd rather not to have it.
Oh, that's just heartbreaking. It really gets to the human cost behind the economic exchange.
It really does. And these long periods without a husband, they also led to attitudes, behaviors that kind of defied conventional expectations.
How so?
Well, the societal ideal was the faithful, patiently waiting wife. That was the expectation.
Sure.
But the reality was sometimes different. Some wives disputed with husbands. Some took lovers. Some even sold land without their husband's knowledge.
Really?
Yes. And these actions sometimes led to serious family disputes, or in some cases, influenced a man's decision not to return home at all.
That adds another layer of complexity. So how are these women perceived publicly? You mentioned the term Gold Mountain women.
Yes, Jinchampo.
Yeah.
Local publications often referred to them that way. They were identifiable, apparently, by their jewelry, sometimes even made from U.S. gold coins that had been sent back.
Interesting.
And male observers at the time, they described them as having, quote, fancy vocabularies, wasteful and arrogant manners, modern clothing.
Sounds a bit judgmental.
It does. Yet, women who actually live this lifestyle sometimes talk about boredom, not leisure, not wastefulness, but just emptiness.
So a real disconnect between the external perception and the internal reality.
Definitely. It suggests the reality was far more nuanced than those outside views allowed for.
What do you think accounts for that gap, the judgment versus the boredom?
It's likely a mix of things, isn't it? The public perception probably involves some envy, maybe some judgment, and just a superficial understanding of their lives.
Right.
I mean, yes, they had access to remittances, which gave them a certain economic standing, maybe better clothes or jewelry. But those descriptions like wasteful and arrogant, that might reflect male discomfort with women holding new kinds of authority.
Or maybe just misinterpreting behavior that was really a response to their unique, quite difficult circumstances.
Exactly. And their own experience of boredom, that speaks volumes. It highlights the emotional vacuum, the loneliness of living without a spouse for years, sometimes decades, regardless of the money. It's a different kind of poverty, perhaps.
Now, a lot of the historical record on this, especially about women, can feel a bit dry. Official documents, statistics.
Yes, it often lacks that personal dimension.
But here's where things get interesting. Our deep dive uncovered insights from some unexpected places, like fiction.
Fiction can offer this incredible emotional depth that's often missing from those traditional records.
And there's this one novel, The Poison of Polygamy. It was serialized in Melbourne way back in 1909, 1910.
Amazing source.
Yeah.
And based on the author's own family experiences.
Right. And it features these incredibly strong female characters, particularly Ma, the main character's wife.
Ma's story in the novel, it really brings these experiences to life, doesn't it?
It does. We learn about her pushing her husband to go seek funds on the gold fields. We feel her anxiety waiting for news, for remittances.
And the consequences of his success, both good and bad.
Yeah. Her mother's advice to the son-in-law was so direct. Be industrious and frugal, save his money, return to China soon. Practical advice.
Very practical. And Ma herself, she pleads in letters for news to allay my concerns and begs him to make your return at the nearest opportunity and not suffer my longing eyes to wear out.
That longing. And the novel goes deep into her internal thoughts, portraying this profound loneliness.
That passage is striking.
She imagines dwelling as a partnerless young duck, as a flockless swan, sitting with only a lamp for company, sleeping in my shadow's embrace through interminable nights, just crushing loneliness.
And it even depicts her contemplating suicide at one point.
Which is intense, but what stops her is just as revealing, right?
Absolutely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really underscores how deeply cultural and familial obligations shaped everything, even in moments of utter despair.
What were the reasons?
She was stopped by these powerful motivations. Her childlessness, the fact her husband was brotherless, meaning no one else could carry on the line, and her immense duty, the duty to offer incense for his ghost if he died, and to face his ancestors.
Wow. Those are things a purely economic or statistical history would just miss entirely.
Completely. They reveal this complex web of personal and societal pressures that defined these women's lives, motivations that kept them going.
And the novel doesn't shy away from the awkwardness either. The reunion after a long absence.
Yes, that scene is brilliant. Mai initially mistakes her returning husband for a burglar.
Understandable after years.
And then becomes embarrassed and awkward when she realizes who it is. It just perfectly captures the raw human side of these long separations and reunions. It's more than just money changing hands.
It really is. Okay, so understanding the lives of these women, it seems like it really forces us to rethink the whole interpretation of the Chinese diaspora.
Definitely.
This perspective challenges some core concepts like the sojourner idea, how we view migration restrictions, even ideas about transnationalism and success.
Precisely. Let's take the sojourner concept first. This idea described Chinese migrants as basically temporary residents, right?
Yeah, and it's often seen as a kind of racist label, implying they weren't really committed to staying.
Right. But when you factor in the thousands upon thousands of wives and mothers back in the villages, maintaining these incredibly strong family and emotional ties, then the sojourner label starts to look different. Less like a derogatory term imposed from outside, and maybe more like a reflection of the migrant's own intentions. many did intend to return.
So it shifts from a border guard view, trying to limit migration, to understanding the migrants' own motivations, which often centered on a temporary abscess to support the family back home.
That makes sense. And what about migration restrictions, the laws like the Chinese Exclusion Act in the U.S.?
Well, those laws undoubtedly had a huge impact on migration patterns, no question. But the low numbers of Chinese women migrating, that pattern existed even before those laws were fully in place.
Oh, interesting. Why was that?
It's often attributed to factors within Chinese society itself, cultural restrictions on women traveling, plus simple financial inability. Families couldn't afford to send everyone.
So including the village women's perspective makes it harder to just blame restrictive laws entirely. Exactly. It forces us to see it as a much more complex interplay of factors, external restrictions, and internal cultural norms and family-based decisions. It wasn't just one thing.
And transnationalism, how does this change our view of that?
Well, transnationalism is this concept trying to explain movement and connections beyond just single national histories, right? Looking at ties across borders. But it often tends to focus mainly on the men moving back and forth, the ones physically crossing borders.
Okay.
This deep dive suggests we could build a much richer, more robust understanding of transnationalism if we include the women in the villages.
Yeah.
They were central to maintaining those family and community ties across huge distances.
They were the anchors.
Precisely. They enabled this whole transnational existence through their work, their management, their steadfastness back home.
That's a powerful reframing. And finally, this changes how we even define success, doesn't it?
Radically, I think. Traditional diaspora history, it often focuses on those who made it overseas, right? The ones who stayed became merchants, professionals.
The ones who assimilated, maybe?
Perhaps. That's often the narrative of success. But if you look at it from the perspective of the women waiting in the villages, what was success to them?
Right. A husband not returning, being abandoned. Or even if he succeeded financially but decided to remove the family from the village, from their ancestral home, that might be seen as failure.
Exactly. And the reality is, for this period we're talking about, a majority of the men actually did succeed in their primary goal, which was often to earn money and return to their families, to their wives and mothers in the villages.
So that offers a completely different definition of success, one centered on return and family reunion, not necessarily permanent settlement elsewhere.
It's a definition rooted in the village perspective, not just the destination country's perspective.
So wrapping this up, we've really seen how integrating the stories of these women, the ones who stayed in China, it completely transforms our understanding of the Chinese diaspora.
Yeah, it reveals their resilience, their unexpected authority, their complex emotional journeys.
And it fundamentally challenges these long-held assumptions we have about migration, about family, and about what it really means to succeed in that context.
So thinking about all this, what stands out to you, listening right now, about the power and the untold stories of those who, just by staying put, were actually just as much a part of this massive global movement as those who traveled thousands of miles?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other historical narratives might be incomplete? How many stories are missing because we haven't sought out the experiences of those who from home were truly holding up half the family?
Well, I think that was a very interesting discussion from our bots, as usual. They brought out some of the interesting aspects of this history, how relatively difficult things were, the emotional aspect of it. We had to use some of it fictional. The Poison of Polygamy is, of course, a fiction, and that can't be forgotten. But nevertheless, it was written by somebody who had himself, his own mother had been one of these women left behind, and I think he made an effort, Wang Xiping anyway, made an effort to express that. So given their lack of sources, I'm not unwilling to use an historical novel, although normally I wouldn't do these things as not so much a source, but simply as another aspect to our thinking to help us look at these women who are left behind, these women holding up half the family who are so often left out of the history because we're looking at the white settler nations. You know, they come to Australia, they come to America. This is what must be important. But of course, for the people who are men of the diaspora, what was important were their families back home, sending money where their mothers were, their wives, and increasingly their daughters as well as, of course, their sons. So I hope that perhaps we can think a bit more. I'm afraid I don't think we can do a lot to do more research. Unfortunately, we've missed our chance, but I think we should look at that and put the individual stories that people often harp on, women or not, in perspective, and realise that the vast majority of people are fairly anonymous. They live harsh lives, and we can only reflect on in a general kind of way. But nevertheless, I think it's worth doing that, and we should focus on that as much as we can, not just the easy sources, but the difficult ones as well. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. And if you want more, there's plenty more podcasts in the series, of course. This is number 18. Go back and look at general overviews of history, look at Chinese opera. There's a variety of things. I'll be doing more, of course, in the future, or write to chidestudypress@gmail.com if you want more information, or look out for the website. Thank you very much for listening.